this idea of psychedelics, microdosing, Michael Pollan, Tim Ferriss, all of these people, right? And I get it a lot too. A lot of the patients, especially younger ones, come to me with some issues that, they're going through some sickness, some ailments, and there's emotional sides, and they feel that this will help them break through. Mm-hmm. I have always been conflicted, same as my father has always been. There is no panacea. This is not an easy fix of just take this and you'll be better and open your mind and suddenly see the world differently. Does it happen? Absolutely. And I want to hear yours because you've really dealt with shamanism and experienced that. But from my even understanding in shamanic kind of rituals with this, it's sort of whatever happens, happens. The shaman gives this to you, and if you bug out and jump off that cliff, that's what's meant to be, and it's like, oh, that's kind of, rough, but I don't know what people are kind of thinking and experiencing through this. So can you give your experience? Can you kind of enlighten us as to what this means to go on a medicinal journey like this?
So medicine journeys, I think, to your point, that what I always tell people is you're going to get what you need, not what you want. And so one of my the last clients that I took on medicine journey, she was like, I want to be a mermaid, witch, fairy. And I was like, okay.
This should be interesting.
It's just going to be interesting. So the medicine gives you what you need, not what you want. And while having a bad trip is never fun, what I can say is that if you're having a bad trip, those were emotions that were stuck somewhere inside of you that needed to come out. Mm-hmm. And so through the process of medicine journey, you almost bypass the conscious mind. So you while you're in medicine journey, I mean, depending on how much medicine you take, but in all of the medicine journeys that I've done, and I've done quite a number, there was a part of me that recognized that I was still here. I wasn't completely off my head. And I've taken a lot, a massive amount. So I never lost myself completely. So there was always that presence of I'm here. But it bypassed the ego, it bypassed the defenses, it bypassed the coping strategies and coping mechanisms, and got in symbolic form to whatever you need to deal with at that moment. So if I needed to deal with healing from, I'll take you through my first medicine journey was I had recently had an abortion. Mm-hmm. And that was, I chose to have the abortion, whether or not a woman chooses it, it's still a very painful thing to go through. Right. So emotionally, I was grieving. I was grieving not only the abortion that I had, but I was also grieving my relationship with my mother, which has never really been that great. Mm-hmm. And then I was also grieving, or maybe I was working on this thing of rejecting myself as mother. So there were multiple levels of emotions that were going on. And I did the medicine journey in Sedona, and I remember having this experience where what I saw was almost this womb. I was inside of the womb hugging myself. Mm. And in that moment, I recognized that this whole time I had been pushing myself away. I had been rejecting a part of myself that was mother energy, let's say. And the reason I did that was because I rejected my own mother. And I felt rejected by my own mother. And so I never wanted to be that. So, but not by not being that, I was also rejecting myself. And so as you can imagine, when you reject any part of yourself, when you disconnect from any part of yourself, there are emotional, psychological, and even physical issues that you have to deal with. So in this medicine journey, I was able to see that clearly. I was able to see it like a movie was playing in front of me. I was able to feel what that felt like. The medicine journey lasted maybe 6-ish hours, 7-ish hours. And then there's a time of integration where I worked with my teacher for a few days. And then, of course, after that, I have to do the work.
Yes.
The medicine is great because it removes the ego, it removes the conditioning, and it gives you the clear picture. But that's not the end of it. You have to then go on and do the work to integrate whatever the lessons were.
Right.
So to your point of like that people want to do it and it's going to change their whole life. You will probably get some great insights, and then you have to do the work.
Was in your case, it seems like that symbolism was clear to you, right? You saw it, you understood it. I've heard other people that they saw things, but they weren't quite understanding why they were seeing it. Is that a person-to-person case? Is that different for, different people? What's going on there that your symbolism was so clear and you took it and were able to do something positive where others just have a trip and it's like a fun thing almost. They don't, they saw some crazy things and then just go on with their lives almost. And it doesn't seem like that symbol came to them as clearly of what they should do.
Yeah. I would question if someone was having a lighthearted, great experience in a setting of healing, they're probably not doing the work. So they probably didn't even start the work when they got there. They were probably like, I just want to go trip balls. But that's one thing. The other thing with the symbology stuff, like I've learned to read my symbology. I've done dream interpretation myself. I'm pretty aware of what these things mean for me. So I already went in having this understanding. The thing that I can say is that what is true is the feeling of it. The symbols are just the way that your subconscious is trying to explain the feelings to you. So I'll give you an example. I worked with a woman who she had a feeling that she had possibly been molested as a child. She had no memory of it. It was showing up in her body in terms of tension, like that you could see her body was constricted. We did medicine journey, and she saw a visual of the molestation, and she felt whatever that feeling was. Now, I can't say yes or no, she was molested based off of that. What I can say is that feeling that she experienced on the medicine journey was a feeling she had felt before. And her brain was her subconscious was trying to tell her in a way that her intellect could understand it. It's like, okay, you had this feeling. What's a scenario I can play for you to get you to understand it? Mm-hmm. So does that make sense? It's not necessarily it's the feeling that you want to connect to within the medicine journey, and the visual is those are the details of it.
Right. And of course, I think you need to go in with an intention, and then there's interpretation, and you need to understand yourself. And that's a big part, I think, of healing in general, is understanding yourself, keying into some certain things that you see over and over, the lessons that need to be learned. Now, if you're going through this and you're getting those kind of hints at something, is it necessary sometimes to have multiple journeys to keep opening doors? Or is it like during your journey, you should be given the clues and answers during it, and others are not necessary?
I think that's more of an individual choice. What I could say is you're not getting all the answers in one medicine journey.
Yeah.
So, just like healing, you never get, it's not like, here's your list and now work on this for the rest of your life.
Because I think that's what a lot of people think. They're just like, I'm going to take this and I'm going to have this revelation and all will be well. I will raise my consciousness to so high and I'm going to be above this earthly world and live happy and healthy.
No.
I mean, that is a little bit of the narrative I've heard from some people. I'm like, bullshit. I'm sorry. I got to call it out, man. Like, nothing works that way.
Yeah, that's not at all how it works. It will give you what you need in this moment. You have to do the work. And then if you want to go deeper, you go deeper. And there's always going to be layers. There's always going to be layers that are coming off. So yeah, like in an ideal world, if you are really looking to heal yourself, it wouldn't be one time. It would probably be a number of them over an extended period. I mean, I don't mean like every weekend. I mean like, you might do one a year for a number of years or, whatever it is, but your healing doesn't happen instantaneously. You might have epiphanies instantaneously, and those things you can use to develop the, total healing program around yourself. But you're not getting all the answers in one go.
Sure.
Definitely not.
And that makes sense. That is healing in a nutshell. It's never one. It's peeling back layers, and your subconscious deals with that as well as your conscious level. Yeah. How important is it to have a guide that you trust or a guide that understands what they're doing? Is that like number one, even above what you're taking? Number one. Yes. You have to feel safe. I remember having this conversation with someone. Their friend did mushrooms, not in a healing setting, but like just for fun, and then went to Times Square. And I was like, you have just set yourself up for a horrible trip. If you're from New York, Times Square is the last place you want to be. Anything like sober, draw anything. Yeah, exactly. So why would you go there tripping?
So. I think the person that you work with is of utmost importance because they're going to be the ones who are providing the container for you. And you want them to be able to hold the space for whatever you have to go through. You have to trust that if and when it gets down to some deep grief or pain or hurt or whatever emotion that is buried somewhere inside of you, that this person can stay there and hold that for you as you go through it. And if you don't have that container, that's going to cause other issues. It's going to, especially while you're in the medicine, especially while your perception is very different. If you don't feel that safety, I mean, it's just like, if you think of it kind of like a parent and a child, if that child doesn't feel safe to explore, they're not going to explore. And so in that capacity, a shaman is almost like your energetic parent. They're like, I have you. You can do whatever you need to do. And I'm still going to have you. I'm still going to be here. And I see you. And so that's why I think it's really important to trust the person that you're doing it with. Yeah.
So would you recommend building a relationship with that person beforehand? Sometimes you just have a feeling, I've heard they're good people. I hear this sometimes when people go on these journeys and they're recommended, they're good people. I'm just going to go do it. Where I was like, well, do you really know them? And maybe you do that. But even I say in medicine, you go in, you don't actually perform treatments until you build a little bit of a relationship with a doctor. At least that's the way I see it at our clinic. You have a few meetings and then you decide whether you want to go through with it or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I've worked with, my teacher I worked with for 8 years. So like there was a trust built up between us. I knew she wasn't going to do anything to hurt me. I've heard of stories of people that, you go to like a yoga studio somewhere and like you do ayahuasca and then like, you go off into the street in New York City and finish your day or, continue. And I'm just like, that seems ridiculous in the context of healing.
Yeah.
And also, I personally like to work with people leading up to medicine journey. It's really funny. It's the difference in men and women. Almost all the women I work with there's no resistance. So I can say something to them and they might not completely understand it yet, but they don't outwardly reject it. Men are so fucking resistant.
Of course we are.
So resistant. And it's so ego. It's so much ego. And I get it based off of like their conditioning. They can't be seen to be vulnerable. And like, I completely understand that. But just sitting there, I had this conversation with someone that I'm going to do a medicine journey with soon. And we were talking about something, and he was talking about these relationships he's in. And in his words, he says, I think she just thinks I'm not enough. And so I'm like, what that's reflecting back to me is that you don't think you're enough. And
Yes.
he's like, no, I think I'm enough. And he went into this whole story. And then we get to another part of the conversation where every person he's ever been with has cheated on him. And, I don't know, maybe I'm not enough. And I'm like, and there we are. and so it's like that with men. I find it's very interesting having to like skirt the ego and like, how do I get you to see what I'm saying without coming up against the ego? So to your point, especially with men, I feel like I need to put in some work leading up to it. So I know what their ego looks like when it's coming. Like I worked with this one guy, and anytime I saw his ego, I was like, give me 50 push-ups. And he would do 50 push-ups. He would come back and he's like, okay. But it's like, there has to be some way to break through that ego. And to do it in medicine journey is, okay, we could do it that way, but like, let's break the ego first and then get to, the ego is just your vigilant self trying to protect the vulnerable self. So if we could get past that and just get to the vulnerable stuff, then like you're going to progress faster.
You're clearing the path for seeing more, right? It's like detoxing the body before you do any therapy makes the therapy that much more effective. Exactly.
That's exactly the idea, except with the ego.
Yeah.
I'm like, can I choke you? Will that do it?
That's tough. And a lot of people don't realize what the ego is, or that it's there, or that it's so strong. You just live with it. It becomes, and it feeds off of this needing more. So it's a very difficult thing to break through, and breaking a little bit of it down and going into that journey sounds like it could be quite a revelation to many people, especially men.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually doing a men's circle this upcoming weekend, and I think it's going to be very interesting because, first of all, you have a few men in the group, so there's already the like interpersonal competition ego.
The machismo comes out, a little bit of chest inflating, right?
Yes. And like in my head, I'm like, you are all going to be sobbing like little children in 2 hours. Can we just not do this?
Oh God, I wish I could see that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just really, the ego is, we start identifying with the ego. We think it's our personality. And, but if we recognize that personality is just a protective mechanism, then, that makes it just makes it a lot easier to work with. It's like, you're coming to me, and now you're resisting me. Why? Mm-hmm. And that's the ego. That's your personality, your defense mechanism. And it's like, can we just put that over there for a sec? So it's all a process. And, just like what you do at Innovative Medicine, it's not a end all be all solution to everything, but it is a way to get directly to the thing that you need to focus on in this moment for your healing.
Is there anyone you'd say that is not suitable for a medicinal journey? I mean, if they're coming to you and seeking it, it seems that they already have some intention, but what other things are almost prerequisites that you'd say would be necessary?
So, I mean, the first thing is, if you're seeking it, there's probably something in that. Yeah. I would say, obviously, I personally wouldn't work with anyone who is on psychiatric medication.
Mm-hmm.
I would work with them leading up to it to see where they're at. I've worked with people who wanted to do medicine journey, and after 3 months of working together, I've decided, like, you're not ready to do this. And so it's really dependent on how receptive I think they are.
Right.
So
and you're making a judgment call on that too, right? You're feeling it out and seeing it, and you're guiding them, because it's not, in the end, it's probably your decision, correct? To guide them. If you say you're not ready, they could say, I want to, but you have to be responsible. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to be the one doing this for you. And if I feel like you're not receptive to this yet, then I don't want to take that on.
Right.
So, and I can take on a lot. I am ready to deal with a lot of stuff. But if I recognize that there's part of you that just is not ready to do it, I'm going to say, this is not happening.
Yeah. Are you using different substances on these trips, on these journeys? Are you using just medicinal mushrooms or ayahuasca, or what are you doing?
The medicine that I work with clients is mushrooms. Psilocybin. Yeah. I've taken mushrooms, San Pedro, ayahuasca in other ceremonies. So I've experienced them. I prefer to work with mushrooms myself.
Just curious, are there differences to what you experienced and maybe what you've heard from each that will kind of put them in different positions?
Yeah. So it's very interesting. I find with ayahuasca is very much grandmother energy. She is like the all-knowing feminine darkness, if you will. It's hard to put this into words.
That sounds pretty cool.
And it's quite interesting because the first time you've heard about ayahuasca experience before?
Yep.
So the common narrative is that you purge. Physically you purge, emotionally, psychologically you purge. So the first time I ever did ayahuasca, I was expecting to fully purge. Now, granted, I had done 8 years of medicinal work before doing ayahuasca with mushrooms. But still, I was like, all right, get ready. Here we go. And so the only thing I experienced with ayahuasca that first time was, and it was nighttime, and I was probably in a group of 20 other people, and I laid there and had my eyes closed. And the only thing that I experienced was I saw golden light and I felt completely peaceful. There were no other visuals beyond the golden light. There was no other feeling beyond feeling peaceful. And it was quite interesting because everyone else around me was purging. So like if I listened to them, I would start feeling a little nauseous. But anytime I brought it back to myself, peace and golden light. And that's been my experience with ayahuasca so far. I mean, I have had visuals since then, but it's always been very much, she's always been very kind to me. And if I think about it from my past experience, both my mother and her mother, my grandmother, were both very hard women. And so, although I'm sure they loved me, there was no outward appearance of love. I could not tell. So I think, again, back to this idea of the medicine gives you what you need, not what you want. I was expecting the beating, which would have been consistent with my growing up. And she gave me instead what I needed, which is, you need to feel peace, my little one. You need to feel this safety. And that's been my experience with her. I've never purged with her. Physically, emotionally, I'll cry and stuff. But so she's been always very gentle with me. So she's grandmother. San Pedro is grandfather energy. So often done in daytime, starting the ceremony in daytime in the light. That was much more visual to me, those times that I do it. Those times are also very physical for me. So, you know, when an animal goes into fight or flight, and as soon as they get away from the predator, you'll see them go through this shivering thing to like offlet that energy. Yes. In all of my San Pedro ceremonies, it has been that. It's this uncontrollable shivering. And it's funny because, you know, your part of your brain is still there and you're like, am I cold? What's going on? And you're like, no, I'm not cold at all. It's just my body is going through a process of offletting all the repressed emotions. So in San Pedro, I feel like I'm being held. It feels like my grandfather is holding me and protecting me. That's what the experience is like for me. And then with mushrooms has more of grandson energy. So kind of playful, depending on what you need. Not always playful, but it's a bit lighter. It's a bit, for me, it's a bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? It lightens the energy rather than like with ayahuasca. It's like, it's very here, now, not heavy necessarily, but here. With medicine, it feels like the layers are coming this way. If that, again, this is all very challenging to put into words.
Of course, I understand.
But I think for me, those are the differences. I mean, across the board, ayahuasca is grandmother, San Pedro is grandfather, mushrooms are grandson. But that's the energy that I feel in each of them. And
you're only going with the grandson when you do your journeys?
When I work with people.
When you work with people, yes.
Yeah. When I work with other shaman, I've done
whatever. Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah. I mean, not whatever they're offering, but depending on what it is. So, so that's what I work.
What's the environment like that you like to position people in if you're working with someone? Is there a particular environment or is it to each person? How does that work? Because I do feel like you said Times Square probably is an environment you want to be doing this journey in. So what is the ideal environment?
So the ideal environment is, we pass through phases. When I work with people, we usually pass through phases. The first one will be in a safe container. So, I mean, I prefer to go up somewhere in nature, not in New York City, somewhere that is not a place that you're familiar with. So not your own house, because then you have connections and memories, and we want to create a blank space, really. So somewhere out of the city, connected to nature, somewhere where we could start out inside and then eventually move outside. And so that transition is very important to me, to be able to be safe. And because it's just like the narrative of life, right? You start in the small container of your mother's womb, then you're in the home, and then eventually you go out into the world and interact with the world. And so this is energetically mimicking that cycle. So I've done it, like this weekend, we're going up to Garrison. So, I mean, sorry, Airbnb, but sometimes we do it with Airbnbs.
There's someone right now at Airbnb looking into your account.
Where is she? Yeah, exactly. But the important part is like nice container somewhere outside of the city that we have access to then going outside.
Yeah. No, it sounds like that would make sense where you're going through that energetic and you want to be away from things there. Yeah. What are your feelings on microdosing? Because I feel like a lot of people have been pushing for that as well to kind of, is that something you have dealt with?
I mean, I've personally done it a little bit with mushrooms, and I can't really talk too much to it because I've not experienced it. I'm a big believer and I want to experience it fully before I comment on it. I've not done that consistently enough to know to give it a thumbs up or thumbs down. I've heard a lot about it. So yeah, I wouldn't comment on it fully because I've not experienced it yet.
Yeah. And for people that are patients going through maybe treatment or something, would you recommend doing this during a treatment, or do you have to be at a certain state? Meaning a lot of doctors would probably not recommend this, especially from the conventional side, that they stop their medication or stop some kind of treatment and go there. Yeah. But, I know there are a lot of patients exploring things. Yeah. Is there a way to do this that is still comprehensive? Like if you're getting treatment, IVs and detoxing and everything, would there be a point where you'd say, all right, let's wait, or you could do it during treatment?
I mean, I guess I would say what kind of treatment? Like, I wouldn't, if someone is doing chemo and radiation, I would not do it. But I think that, I've worked with some physicians who have recommended clients to me, and like we have dialogue back and forth, and, based off of our interactions, if the doctor is like, yes, I think this is somewhat something that they can do at this point, then we can do it within the treatment. Mm-hmm. I think, with people who have tried everything,
which is almost everyone out there with chronic disease,
right? That medicine journey is something good for them because you've already exhausted everything else. And now let's take a second and look inside and see what you're telling yourself and see what the issues are. And then those are really good indications. I mean, how amazing would that be? Somebody comes to me, okay, I have this, and this. Okay, let's work through this medicine journey. These are the symbols that came. Let's understand the symbols. And then I'm like, Casper, these are the psychological and emotional things she's working with. This is how it's manifesting in her body. And now those are tools that the doctors can use in order to give better treatment to them. Yeah. So I think, I don't know how soon that trajectory is actually, how soon that would happen, because I know, most people are still on the ledge and or totally against medicine journey. Yeah. But I see it being a very useful tool for the healing process.
I mean, you've talked me into it a little bit more because, my whole issue with a lot of these things where CBD, or medical mushrooms is people like to use it as this is the cure, the answer to my problems. And I just don't believe they're in that at all. And hearing how you're explaining that takes multiple tries, and you got to do the work still. It isn't that you take this and everything is solved. Yeah. And of course, I believe anything that's in nature can help us in some ways, right? Right. It could also, harm us, as everything has polarity in this world. Right. And they are tools, but used properly in the right guidance and understanding that there is still work to be done. That's a big part of it. So.
Yeah. So I want to share too, that one story I shared with you about my first medicine journey. And so then of course there was tremendous healing within that time. And then of course I had to do the work after. And then many years later, I did another medicine journey, and it was also related to this idea of mother. And at that time I had tremendous lower back pains. My lower back spasmed in the middle of the night. Sometimes I couldn't sleep. I couldn't touch my toes. It was painful. And so I was on this medicine journey, and I'm in this sacred circle, and I'm laying there, and I hear this voice, whoever this voice was, and this voice said to me, "You are mother." And me, my ego self, was like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. We've gone through this before. I'm not.
You're wrong here. All right. You're wrong.
You got the wrong lady. And then the voice was like, yes, you are. And then me and my ego self was like, literally, I was like a third grader having a tantrum. No, I'm not. And this went back and forth for however long it went back and forth. And eventually the understanding, and when I say understanding, I don't mean the intellectual understanding, but the embodied understanding hit me that I am mother, whether or not I have a biological child. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I received that, my lower back stopped hurting and has not hurt since. Mm. And so, yes, you can have things that instantly change in a medicine journey. I'm not discounting that. That has happened personally to me. However, that was one time out of many times. And I would even say that what appeared to be an epiphany within the medicine journey was based off of all of the work that I had previously done. Right. And it finally got to an embodied understanding in that moment.
Yeah.
So, yes, you have epiphanies, but it's based off of previous work and there's work going forward.
Right. And I can imagine that all the work that's put in, it sometimes it is the needle that breaks the camel's back in a sense. So you were just at that point and there was that last piece of resistance that needed to melt away and be like, right. You are mother, bitch. Like, listen to me.
Exactly.
Get it through your head. You're like, oh, okay.
It was, I mean, really, if I could do a cartoon of that, it was just like me having a tantrum with the universe just looking at me like, just take it.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, fine.
And that's the thing, when the ego comes out, I've been told this, when you're having like tantrums and someone's having a tantrum, it really is like a little child. You have to see them as that sometimes and treat them as that. You see these older, people having these tantrums, and it is almost like you got to treat them like a child. What can I do for you? Okay, like, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, baby.
And you need to melt that ego away because that's what it is. That's what's coming out. And it's amazing when you could break through that. And that's why I think something like this, a medicinal journey, could be an incredible thing to release certain blockages, whether it's energetic, emotional, psycho-emotional. And these are the initiation points of so many diseases that happen.
Exactly.
And sometimes the last missing piece. You can work on biochemistry and fix it and biohack yourself, eat well, work out, like get all the treatments, have all the devices. I see these people, but still struggle because they're not addressing that last piece.
That little bit. And I think that's what I made the distinction between this intellectual understanding. Like you could have all the knowledge, but until it's in here, you're not getting it.
Yeah.
And so the medicine journey is a useful tool to get it here a little bit more. And show you what you need to do in order to get it here more. So,
right. And clearing those blockages. And now one blockage you're seeing a lot of, and this is to switch subjects now, is sexuality. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are out there kind of not understanding where they lie and how they are dealing with sexuality, I think. And I do think that, it's a lot of Americans and a lot of the world right now is kind of, suffering with an idea of what sexuality should be and repressing certain sexual things. So tell me about your work, because you are one to make people blush. You are one to just talk straight and shoot the shit when it comes to sexuality. Yes. And I love it. There is no BS. There is no hiding it. There is no let me sugarcoat this for you. No, you're going right in.
No, put your balls on my head. No, okay.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. All listeners like, oh shit, just perked up.
So I feel like sexuality is such a misunderstood and mismanaged component to all of humans. Mm-hmm. I have never met a human who has a healthy sexual expression, myself included. I'm better at it. My dysfunction tended towards the hypersexuality. And that's because when I was a kid, I wasn't getting the love that I wasn't receiving love from my parents, or so I perceived. And I got a lot of attention for the way I looked and being sexual. And so I used sexuality as a way to attract attention, which I misunderstood as intimacy and love. Mm-hmm. So mine was, mismanaged in the opposite way to a lot of people that I see. Most people repress parts. Yeah.
You have like hypo and hyper, right? Yeah, and you're a little hyper. Most people are hypo, which is, and you want that balance almost in a sense. Yeah.
And so the metaphor that I like to use with people to demonstrate this idea is that if, let's say you build a beautiful mansion and you forget to add a vital room to it, let's say it's the kitchen, eventually you're going to say, I'm hungry, I need to cook something. And you realize, oh shit, I don't have a kitchen. And so in order to build the kitchen, you're going to have to completely change the format of the mansion. You're going to have to change the piping, the wiring. You're probably going to have to get new appliances. In some cases, it's probably easier to just demolish the entire mansion and rebuild. Right. And this is what I think that people do with their sexuality. They're like, they repress it based off society, culture, family, religion. We all know why this stuff is repressed. And they want to then piecemeal it in. They're like, can I just put this here? Mm. And I'm like, no, you have to change the way that your whole self is. You have to change your whole identity, basically. And that's not to say we're throwing every bit of you away, but that your sexual self is a large part of who you are. And if you've been rejecting that part of who you are, that means your identity is not actually you. What you take to be your personality is not you. This is the conditioned you. This is the part of you that can't deal with that other part of you because you're ashamed of it, or you're whatever the negative association you have with sex is. So I think this is really, really important. And this is why I constantly talk about it, because nobody wants to talk about this in healing. Mm-mm. It's like, okay, you're eating right, you're exercising, you're seeing a therapist, you're seeing a mind body, you're specialist, you're doing, the crystal bed, you're doing all the things. Yeah. You're doing everything. All of the things. Yeah. And you're not talking about your sexuality. That's like, if I'm like, all right, we're going to work on everything but your heart. It's a part of you. Yeah. What are you doing?
Absolutely.
So I think that's the block I come up against. And, this is a really tough one because it's such a taboo topic.
Incredibly taboo. And we're taught at a young age, it's so taboo, right?
Yeah.
Even that idea of nudity. I know I was just in Fire Island with my niece and nephew. They're running around naked the whole time, but the whole time the parents like, you can't do, like, put your clothes on, like everything. I'm like, let them be naked. It's cool. Like they're just out there having fun and everything. It's what we are as humans. Right. Thousands and thousands of years, we were just naked out there and surviving. Right. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You have to admire the human body in all its forms. And I know you've done a lot of that with your shoots and doing the naked, which is awesome, and appreciating the human body and what it is. But as a whole, I think society has kind of, blocked that out and almost turned sexuality into a negative thing that breeds, violence and other, you group it together, which is crazy to me. Like shooting someone and being naked ain't the same. Let's be honest.
And I mean, come on, I'd rather see people naked than see people getting shot.
Absolutely. But we kind of sit there and we group it. We don't say that enough. It's almost weird to say, I'd rather see you naked than, with your clothes on. And I guess there is a little bit of that, idea of there's harassment, all these, and people always group sexuality into a negative when it doesn't have to be, right? So how do we start to change the narrative? Is it just actually having these discussions?
I think it is having these discussions. I think that one of the things that I see a lot is blame. And yes, there has been lots of sexual harassment, and no, that's not good. But we also have to change our relationship with it. And when I say we, I mean everyone. Men have to do it. Women have to do it. Everyone has to do it. When you start working on your own sexuality and what that means and your relationship to it, then all those problems start changing. And it's like, you know, on the one hand, it's a biological drive, right? And on the other hand, society is telling us this is bad. Yeah. So of course we're getting internally conflicted. And what does the internal confliction do? Well, it fucks with your well-being emotionally, psychologically, and physically. Right. If I can use Dr. Gabor Mate, he talks about children when they're developing that you have two basic needs outside of obviously like food, shelter, that kind of thing. You need connection and or attachment and authenticity. And oftentimes a child unconsciously will choose attachment over authenticity because you recognize I need this person to survive. They provide me with food and shelter and emotional support, in quotes, depending on who you are. So subconsciously, the child will always choose attachment because it needs to survive. And then what winds up happening is you begin to repress your authentic self. You begin to repress your emotional needs and wants. And eventually what that does, he's studied this his whole life, is the repression of yourself manifests in diseases or addictions or things like that. Now, if we can take that concept and look at sexuality, children's sexuality right from the beginning is like, no, don't touch that. No, don't do that. So already they're programming themselves to reject that authentic exploration of themselves. And I don't have kids, so like I know it's easier for me to say like, you know, you're fucking your kids up. But I think there's obviously also, you don't want an adult just like on the street jacking off. So, you know, you have to be socialized
again,
properly.
There's a balance, people. Right? Don't go jacking off in the streets.
But I think there's probably a healthier way that sexuality can be approached within the family unit. And then definitely within the society, culture, community units. Otherwise, that part of you can not only affect your psychological well-being, but it can literally have an effect on your physical body. Right. Just like any other repressed part of you would. If you repress grief, that could show up in your body. If you repress anger, that can show up in your body. If you repress this vital part of yourself, sexuality and sexual exploration and sexual expression, that can have a physical manifestation in your body. I've had a few women who have had, they've developed fibroids, which they believe is directly a result of sexual abuse. Again, more studies would need to go into that to like, you know, confirm, but there's a clear link there. There's a clear link. So healthy sexual expression is not only a woo-woo concept of like, let me rub your yoni. It's part of your health. It's part of your overall health. And just like you wouldn't avoid dealing with issues around your heart, you shouldn't avoid dealing with things around your vagina or your penis or whatever apparatus you have. So that's my 2 cents on that.
It makes total sense. That's a huge part of who we are. You said it. As biological beings, there is this, you know, drive to procreate, to just, you know, to get it out basically and be humans and be animals, which we are in some ways. And I think a lot of us have truly repressed that and pushed that down and felt very guilty, felt in negative state, shame and guilt, which, you know, on a Hawkins scale is very low. That is a disease-inducing level of consciousness that sooner or later will manifest into some symptoms and disease. And so if you have someone out there that feels that way, that feels a little bit shameful, either about their past or what's going on or sexually. What would be your advice for like even a simple step they could start to do, to start to take, to acknowledge their sexuality and make it a healthy relationship?
One of the exercises that I have a lot of people do, a lot of women who have issues around sexuality, is what this exercise called aspecting. Have you ever heard of this?
I haven't, no.
So aspecting is a process where you identify and possibly name different aspects of your personality. So an easy one is your inner child. Another one might be, your sexual being. Another one might be, in cases with sexual assault, the part of you that has been sexually assaulted. So you identify those different parts of yourself, name them so you can have a conversation with them, and then you have that conversation, but have that conversation through them. So I could speak to them as me, as Stacy, and then give them the voice to speak back. And that I find to be a very illuminating process because that stuff is full of shame and guilt and pain and all those negative emotions. We often don't want to talk about it. We often don't want to have that conversation because we're scared of what's going to come up. And so, but if you can imagine, if you avoid it, anything you avoid just amplifies. Anything you resist persists.
Yes.
So this is just a method of giving voice to that part of you or those parts of you that have not had voice. And once you start that conversation, then you can ask questions. Well, what do you want? What do you need from me right now? And your body will respond.
Yeah.
Your body will respond when you have a conversation, and take it like you're speaking to a third grader, like a small child. What do you want? What do you need right now to feel safe? And then you do those things. And so I think that that's a really important step, even before we get to like anything sexual related or any techniques or anything like that. It's like, let's start having a conversation with those broken parts of ourselves.
Right.
And see what they want, give them a voice, and see how you could start to integrate them back into you.
And what if you're unsure? Because I know a lot of people, even that come into our center and have some psycho-emotional issues that stem back further and could be sexually related, but either have blocked them so well and put walls around them that they can't even acknowledge them or speak of them or refuse to. Is that something still where you could go into a visualization journey or just kind of deep into yourself and just sit there for a while until it comes up? Like what's the advice there? Because I feel like so many people just don't acknowledge that is even a problem. And if you're not going to acknowledge the problem, you'll never be able to summon it forward in a sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I work with people who don't think there's a problem, there's 2 or 3 ways that I usually look at them. I'm like, your patterns are telling me there's a problem. Yeah. So you may say to me that there's not a problem, but everything around you is saying there's a problem. Yeah. So that's the first way. Look at your outward life, and it's going to tell you exactly what the problem is. It's hard to do it on your own. You usually need somebody to point this stuff out. Yeah. The second and third ways are body posture and body movement. So I can read what their body is telling me. I can read through the stress points, through the rigidity or fluidity of the body, where that stuff is. Again, I wouldn't expect people to be able to do this on their own. You'd want to work with somebody to do this, but your narrative, what the words that you're telling me, basically just give me the details. Everything I need to know, I've already read from the patterns in your life and from what your body is telling me. The details are just there's something intellectually that helps when you tell the details. But in the case of walls, then I would say an exercise they could do is like, well, aspect your wall. What is your wall trying to protect you from? See if the wall says anything back. So you can use that exercise, and eventually and there are some people who are just fucking resistant. And I don't work with resistant people anymore. I'm just like, I'm not trying to convince you. If you want my help, I'll give you my help.
Yeah.
And I'm okay to have a debate back and forth and explain it in details. But like, if you're completely resistant, I'm not interested in convincing you.
Right.
So it's probably different at innovative medicine. You probably get a lot of resistance.
Tons.
Or I don't know. Okay,
Tons. You think that people would come and already, I heard about it, I did this, I did my research, totally resistant. Just incredibly. It's like, why are you even here then,
Exactly.
Like if you really didn't want to go see a movie, you went to see it, you're resistant in watching it, like why would you go then?
Why? Why are we doing this?
But that's our nature, I think, these days. Yeah. We are resistant. We want to say we're open when sometimes we're not, and we're not picking up on that. And it's so true that you have to read your body. It's giving you these signals all the time. As we started talking about the sexuality thing, I noticed myself kind of getting like a little restricted. And that's my natural reaction, I think, to sexuality, because there is that a little bit of resistance there. But I noticed that I was like, hold up, like open up again, like stop the little like scrunching up in the corner. So let's talk about sex, Stacy.
She said balls.
And again, I think we're just taught that since we were little. It's not like our fault. It's just, I was always told, like, don't say those words and don't do those things and don't talk about sex in that way. Right. Like it was a little bit more conservative, stoic, Eastern European upbringing where I was.
Right.
And so I realized that, but being aware of it is the first step, I feel.
Right.
To notice that you're becoming constricted or feeling a certain way or even closing up or talking differently about a subject means there's something going on.
Exactly.
So pick up on that and then be able to either look into it more yourself or find people like yourself to help. Yeah. Because that journey alone to get into it and start to peel back what's going on sometimes requires a little help. And you could try it your own, but I feel like a lot of times that takes a long time. And a lot of times you just kind of give up. The ego sort of wins out and you're perfect. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. I was going to say that the ego is the ego. If you're trying to work on yourself, the ego wants you to stay where you are because it understands where you are. Anything that is unknown is a threat to the ego. And so if you're the ego at this point, then it's going to be like an uphill battle. To do it on your own. You need somebody to mirror that. And you can do work on your own. You don't always need someone. But there's something very helpful about having that back and forth.
Absolutely. It serves as such a catalyst to change. I feel like having someone else there, because you're right. The ego is incredibly strong. It does not want to change. As much as you acknowledge the change, it's incredible what the ego do. The mental gymnastics people are able to do. And I know it too. Like we've all been there. I'm not like saying that, other people are only dealing. We all deal, healers, everyone. Like we're all humans in the same boat here. And, but I've realized that it takes a special, and you already take the step when you reach out and say, I need your help. And that already starts to limit the ego and what it's going to do. And you get that assistance from someone else that knows to spot certain things and can absolutely speed up this healing process and getting to know yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I think the mirror is so important. Otherwise, you're staying within the same shell that the ego is in. So find somebody to work with if it is something that you are looking to. And if you decide to work with me and there's resistance, I will choke you out.
She'll do it.
I will do it.
She will do it. Don't test her. I'll tell you.
I've taken down a lot of men who are a lot bigger than me.
Oh, I know. Stacy, where can people find out if they do want to work with you? If they're listening, be like, yeah, that sounds awesome. I need to either go on a journey, explore my sexuality, all these things that are so necessary that I think people are missing still. So where could they find out more about you?
They could check out my website, stacyberman.com, STACYBERMAN. I just say it like that because everybody always wants to put an E in my name. Yeah. No E in Stacy. Or my Instagram is Stacy Berman, PhD.
Yeah, you're doing awesome things. Is there anything exciting you got coming up? I know you launched in Kuwait with your protein system by Stacy. That was awesome to see. You're doing all this healing stuff. Yeah. I know you had a TV show, I think, right?
That's
the first time you came on, you were just talking about it. And by the way, congratulations. You're the second-time guest also.
Thank you. Yay.
Amazing on this show, on the podcast. So, but yeah, what else?
Yeah, so I'm doing that TV show. So we were supposed to go into production April, and then COVID happened.
And then,
so we're hoping to be able to reconvene in September. So I'm really, really looking forward to that, because that is really incorporating. So all the stuff that I was just talking about body movement and movement patterns and self-perception and sexuality and like being present in your body and feeling the feelings. The TV show is all around that. The TV show itself is called The Naked Sessions. At least that's the working name. Mm-hmm. And the concept is to have people come in one by one. Obviously, I will have had an understanding of what their issues are going in. And then we do a photo shoot with them where they're basically getting naked, but I'm guiding them to be inside their bodies, to start moving in different ways, to start embodying, let's say, beautiful or strong or vulnerable or whatever it is that they need in that moment. And through experiencing that, I've witnessed before my eyes a complete change in their way of being, which of course will have physiological changes over the long term. And of course, there's work to be done afterwards, but it's just a change in perspective or an expansion in perspective of the self. And once the perception has expanded, you can't go back to that. So a quick example of this is one of the first photo shoots I've ever done. I had this one woman, she was a mother of, I think, 2 or 3. I think she was in her late 40s. And I said, well, what does your beautiful look like? And she broke down in tears. She's like, I never consider myself beautiful. And so she's never had that experience within her body. And so we started moving her, and I started asking her questions and show me what this looks like and show me what this looks like. And eventually she was able to get into a pose where she felt beautiful. Not here, she felt beautiful. Mm-hmm. And then that was a starting point for, well, how do I do this now in the rest of my life? So it's a show that will only be probably 30 minutes. I'm hoping we do like follow up, right. But I'm really excited about that. I mean, I think it's visually, the project is beautiful. Naked photos of beautiful women of all shapes and sizes and colors and all that stuff. But emotionally and energetically and healing wise, it's such a beautiful and quite immediate transformation that I see. I mean, I've done the first one. The first one, I was one of the models, and I felt different. But like to hold that container for other people to go through, I mean, for me, it's just like it's like what I was meant to do. So,
oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
I can imagine that's so liberating, and it is a healing, experience, and then to guide people through that, so cool.
Yeah, so that's the next big thing, and we'll see what else life throws at me.
Yeah, well, it's 2020, so you could expect anything.
Right. Exactly. Maybe I shouldn't say that.
Yeah, you're gonna have an intergalactic experience next very shortly.
Life, stop doing this.
Yeah. No, but amazing things, and thank you so much for coming on again and sharing this. I always have a blast chatting with you and talking these topics that are so important and unfortunately not talked about enough and kind of separated from healing. And you're doing an amazing job. So keep it up.
Thank you so much. I always love talking shop with you, and maybe I'll be the first triple guest when something else goes on.
Let's set it up. Let's do it. I mean, we have so much we could talk about every time. These are just 2. This is the tip of the iceberg of shit we could talk about.
I have an idea actually that we should do, but we'll talk about it off camera.
Okay. They're not ready for it yet.
They're not ready.
Stacy, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Casper. Have a good one.